This podcast contains themes that may be distressing to some audiences. Hi guys, I'm Kayleigh Frost, the Head of Clinical Support at Health Assured. I'm joined today by Amy, one of our wellbeing counsellors, and we're going to be discussing how to support your loved ones with mental health. Hi Amy, you okay?
Hi Kayleigh, yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Love that we came matchy-matchy today, pair of French mimes.
Twinning today.
We absolutely are. I love it. How are you feeling? You doing okay?
Yeah, I'm great. Yeah, really looking forward to discussing ways in which we can support or help people advise how to support their loved ones, friends, family.
Brill. Tell me a little bit about yourself first, Amy. So people that have watched our podcast and listened to the podcast will know that we're joined by many of our counsellors. So just give me a little bit of a background to you, Amy. You know, what's your clinical experience? Why are you here today? Why have you decided that this was the podcast that you wanted to be involved in?
So for me, I've had quite a lot of life experiences which led me to access counselling myself.
Yeah.
I was kind of brought up in a family where it was a safe environment and I always got my physical needs met, but there was never quite that opportunity to talk about your emotions or to talk about when things weren't feeling that great. So for me, counselling, it absolutely turned my life around. So to come out of a difficult relationship, I was in the midst of a difficult time with an eating disorder, and I came out of counselling and I just thought, wow, it really turned my life around, and I truly believe that it did save my life at that point. Right. Yeah. And I saw a level 2 advertised in the local paper for my local college, and I thought, you know what, I'll give that a go. And I started that and I never looked back. And at that point, I'd done quite a few different things in my career. I'd worked with children, I'd worked with elderly people. And I started my counselling training, and I just felt like this role, this job really gave me a sense of what I wanted to achieve in life, which was to support people and give back what I'd received from my therapist.
How long have you been a counsellor for now, Amy? Okay,
so I've been in client contact for 7 years.
Wow.
And in that time, I've had a wide variety of roles. So I started off in addiction recovery. Yeah. So one side was clinical and then our side was recovery. So we would support people putting goals in place, things that they wanted to achieve, how to change their lives. And then I started my own private practice, which is quite busy and that I'm still doing as well at the moment. Yeah. I then went into an organisation that provides support for people with life-limiting illnesses, including cancer. Yeah. So for me, that role, I was supporting family members.
I was just about to say,
I was supporting those family members, carers, loved ones whose loved ones were either dying or just been diagnosed with a life-limiting illness. And I really feel that the experience from that role, it would kind of help me to talk about a few different ways in which you can support loved ones today. So that's a tough time, helping people work through that acceptance and that kind of thing. I'm now at Health Assured. I love working on the phones.
I've not paid you to say that.
So I love my role at Health Assured because I work with such a wide variety of clients. And often I do get clients ringing, asking how they can support their loved ones. My passion for helping as well came from becoming a lecturer. So I spent 3 years lecturing, teaching level 2 and sometimes level 3, but that level 2 is that very, very first base that people touch in order to whether to see that counselling's for them. But it's not also just about supporting. I had people from many different roles like nurses, teachers, because they wanted to support their colleagues and people that they worked with just to get those better active listening skills.
I know quite a few people that have gone through level 2, not because they want to be a counsellor, but for that very reason. It helps them in roles where you might be working in like health and wellbeing in general as an industry. Some healthcare assistants have done level 2 as well because of the bedside manner that you need and the amount of people that are going to need more emotional support. So level 2 is a really fantastic, not that we're saying the way to support other people with mental health is all go through a level 2 counselling course. It's very similar to doing like mental health first aid training. Because in that 2-day course, I know it's very different to doing a level 2, but you learn more active listening skills and also ways to open up conversation. So if anyone ever gets the opportunity, do a mental health first aid course as well, just to give you some like baseline conversational skills, especially if you've got no clue how to start conversations anyway. I guess one of the first things, because you mentioned about the helpline, lots of calls that we get, I've noticed, so obviously I look at things from the back end operational perspective. I look at MI, I look at the types of calls that we're seeing increase and the percentages change of call types. We're seeing a huge increase in the category, because you guys have to categorise the calls
we do.
for concerns over another person's mental health or impact of another person's mental health, something like that, isn't it? And we see that spike up, especially at the back end, at the tail end of us coming out of all the lockdowns, when people were worried that because they'd not really spoken to their friend very often, their friends had isolated themselves, family members had isolated themselves. And, I think I did that in the lockdown as well. I, withdrew from people and became quite lonely, even though I wasn't alone. I lived with a friend at the time, but then I moved out on my own in the lockdown and cut myself off. I don't know what it was. Luckily, I'm back with a vengeance. People can't get rid of me. But for a lot of people, they did really struggle. We saw lots of increases in calls. Like, how do I get through to this person? Like, I'm really worried. I don't know. I've not really heard of them in a long time. I don't want to peck their head. I don't want to do their head in, and nag them, but I want them to know I'm here. So with that, I guess, as a starting point, what would you say the little red flags, the concerns, without jumping into panic and crisis mode, what kind of things does someone need to look out for, or consistent changes in behaviour? What kind of things would you recommend that someone needs to look for?
Okay, so I have taken numerous calls from people that have really, really noticed a change in their loved ones since lockdown, coming out of lockdown, life getting busy again, reopening. And a lot of the key things that we should look out for is a change in mood, a change in how somebody is in terms of like interacting, socialising. Sometimes it can be very subtle, the way people change over time, not engaging in things that they would usually. You can recognise a loss of appetite in some people. They might lose weight. They might gain weight if they're overeating as well, especially if they feel isolated and they're spending a lot of time at home. I've worked with a lot of clients that have then gone on to get a bit of social anxiety. It's that fear of getting back out there again. And I know everywhere's been open for quite a few months now, but it's still very, very difficult for people. So there's lots of red flags to look out for. And people become more irritable. More snappy. So they work hard to try and hide it from their loved ones. There's lots of different things you can look out for. If they're becoming withdrawn, spending more time in bed, if they're tired, missing work. And if you contact them, I think we know our friends and family, don't we? If they change, we really recognise a change in people. And we can often say, are you okay? Are you okay? And they'll keep saying, yeah. But their behaviours and responses don't align with what they're telling us.
And you can apply that so you work very closely with your colleagues. You'd know if someone was acting out of character. I think you can apply this to a school setting, to uni, to volunteer work. You spend a lot of your waking hours with certain people. And if you've got a very good relationship, whether that is a professional relationship or an academic relationship or personal, you can pick up on cues, when they're not acting out of character. Now, one of the things I guess we need to be mindful of is that you don't jump to conclusions if someone's having a crap day, Maybe they've had a rubbish night's sleep and they're woken up in a bad mood, or you're allowed to feel a little bit low for a few days. That's fine. I do. And then come back, 10 times, more full of energy and absolutely fine. Sometimes you do need to be a little bit alone, like have some alone time and withdraw yourself. But I guess it's when you're looking at if that becomes quite chronic and persistent.
And it's really important to respect somebody's process. So again, I think we know when our friends, family, loved ones, colleagues, if they do change, and they might disclose little bits of what's going on for them in their lives at that moment in time. So it's really important on how we approach this, and always approach it in a way where it's kind of not done as in like a critical way or that you're judging them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of allowing that space, and it's about choosing the time to approach that with someone. If you get into a point where you think, no, this isn't just a few bad days where someone's struggling, this has been going on for a while, it's looking at ways in which you can approach that. So very, very simple things. Not to approach if they're on their phone and you're sat on yours and you just drop in and say, oh, how's it going? I've noticed this, this and this. So yeah, it's taking those distractions away so you can really, really provide that space for that person. Just to be mindful, don't pick your phone up while you're doing it. Don't sit and watch the TV or be on your laptop at the same time, because what's really important when we help our loved ones, colleagues, family, approach and start to openly talk about this is they need to feel validated.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people might be distracted on their phone or what, because they want to make it less uncomfortable for the two of them, when actually they made it 10 times worse, because of how that other person's going to feel in terms of being valued and having that engagement and dedicated attention.
Yes, 100%.
It will be awkward, especially if you're not used to those because it's quite confrontational in a way, and if you don't, not confrontational, but it is quite aligned to that, I think, isn't it? And I think I would maybe used to struggle more so in having more difficult and awkward conversations, and actually you get into it 30 seconds later, the conversation's flowing. But I think that's a really good point. Those distractions, it needs, but not as intense as sitting across the table like how we are today. Just sat on the sofa together, pop the telly off, turn and look at them like, what's going on? What about, Amy, if there's some distance between you, like geographically, like you're not in the same place, what would you do about broaching those kind of conversations? Okay,
so depending on the person, like some people don't like video calls, it kind of adapting to meet the needs of your friend, colleague, partner, loved one. So on the phone, but kind of putting those boundaries in place in terms of asking them, what are they doing? Are they in a rush? Are they going somewhere? Is that a suitable time? First thing in the morning on the way to work, or if they're out with the children, or so it's thinking about ways in which you can deliver that on the phone. There's kind of video calls. Some people like to text, but again, we have to look at ways in which we deliver a message. We can't just outright accuse somebody of something. And if somebody is feeling vulnerable or struggling, they might really interpret that message in a negative way, that they are being criticised. So it's about, again, getting that timing right, finding that space where they're not too busy or they've not got to rush off out somewhere, where you can really offer that time and that space to that person, whether it be on a video call, on the phone.
Do you think it's worth people being quite open and transparent if they're a little bit lost with having that conversation? They probably never had to discuss someone's, their concerns over someone's mental health. Do you think it would help if someone was like, look, I've got concerns, you've been very distant, you've not been yourself, I don't really know how to navigate and talk about this with you, so I've just come out with it. Be quite open and honest, not try and pretend they know everything about every mental health condition in the world, and be very direct.
So when I used to teach level 2 and my students used to do their active listening skills, by the end of the course they were able to hold a 10-minute listening session. It wasn't a counselling session. They were able to listen for 10 minutes. And there was 3 basic core conditions. So Carl Rogers, the founder of person-centred therapy, believed that we needed to be empathic. So we needed to demonstrate empathy. And when we look at empathy, it's about not understanding it from our perspective. It's a term we use called getting in someone else's frame of reference. So being in someone else's frame of reference, understanding it from their perspective. So we don't approach it from our own personal experience. So we have that empathy. And then unconditional positive regard is where we provide that non-judgmental space. We're working and listening with, as a counsellor I'm working with, as supporting your loved ones, you're spending time with somebody without judging them or opinionating, about kind of validating them and valuing what they're experiencing and respecting their process in that moment as well. And the most important one for me as a counsellor, but you can overlay it onto yourself just in everyday life, is something what we call congruence. And being congruent is being genuine. It's being yourself. So we had a little bit of a discussion beforehand, didn't we, on, I was saying to you that the biggest tool that I take into my client work is myself. I can have all the education in the world, all the theoretical knowledge in the world, but the most important thing that I take in with me is myself, to be genuine, not to be fake, and just offer myself in there. And going back to what you said there, Kayleigh, it's just about being honest and just saying, look, I'm not really sure what to say here, so I just want you to know that I'm here to talk about anything that's going on for you. It's however it suits you in that moment, how to approach that, because we're all different and unique. And our interactions with each other are, if you're more closer to that person, it would be easier. Whereas if it's someone like a colleague or a friend that you're not as close to, but you are concerned about, you'll find your own way of approaching that.
And you might not hit the mark the first time.
No.
And I think that's something that's really important to highlight. Don't be afraid to have that conversation because you might not hit the mark. At least you've given it a go. You tried to get your thoughts and concerns out there in a supportive way with your loved one. But don't just not do it because you think it might go badly.
Yeah, because what you've done there is you've opened that door for someone to take that one step in. And I always use the analogy with clients about planting a seed. So you might plant a seed for somebody, but they might not water it yet, but over time it'll water and it'll start to grow. And because the seed's been planted, it's raised somebody's self-awareness, it's offered somebody that reassurance. So they might not want to grow their seed yet, they might just want to nurture that. But you've opened the door for somebody to take that first step, to know that you're there, to open up to, and ready to be supportive to them.
And to be honest, you know what, if you so me as a loved one, I'm coming to you, me as your friend, Amy, and I'm worried about you, and I'm having that conversation, and I do miss the mark, and I kind of make a bit of a pig's ear of it, and I go, sorry, I've said the wrong thing. I don't know, like you might then actually go, well, you know what, Kayleigh's actually, she cares,
Yes.
Because sometimes if you are, yourself, and you are feeling low or anxious or whatever issue it is that you're having, or you're becoming quite detached, no one else cares about you. In your head, no one really cares for you. No one will take time. You're alone. Nobody wants to support you. But I've just gone and spoken with you. I put my foot in it a bit, probably said the wrong thing or made the wrong assumption. But you might sit there and go, well, you know what? She actually does care. She has been worried about me. I'm not on my own. And the difference that might have just in terms of their kind of self-esteem.
Yes.
Who they think is around them for their support network, because it's quite easily to just, when I was in lockdown, I was like, I haven't got anyone. Actually, all my friends were trying to house party me, WhatsApp me. But I don't know, something happened because I wasn't having that human interaction, something kind of disconnected for me. When actually someone tries to have a bit of a frank conversation and they might be a bit abrupt or say the wrong thing, like, oh, sugar, they do actually give a damn. And that can help.
And again, it's going back to making somebody feel validated. When we feel validated, we feel reassured.
That's the
the validation of it's okay to feel the way that you are. People carry a lot of shame, especially if they're doing things to hurt themselves, if they're self-harming. So if we look at different generations, if we look at the way that we're brought up, so myself, this isn't about me criticising my family or my grandparents, because I really did have a safe upbringing. All my physical needs were met. I was always kept safe. But when my grandparents, I've still got one of my grandparents, they were brought up in a way where it wasn't normal to talk about feelings and love in their family. So that was passed down to my parents. Me and my sister have really changed that for me and my boys. Our boys, she's got 2 boys, I've got 2 boys. And my parents are so loving with my kids.
Yeah.
I couldn't ask for better grandparents, but they've watched me and my sister change and kind of break that cycle. Yeah. So if you were brought up in an environment where it wasn't normal to talk about your feelings, or you was kind of told just to get on with it, that can be a barrier to you opening up to somebody else, yeah, or accepting help from somebody else, because in your mind you'll be thinking, oh, it's a sign of weakness, I feel ashamed. But just to make that first kind of reach to somebody,
yeah,
to reach out, that first kind of point of contact, it can be really life-changing for some people. And when I listen to clients on the phone, and we're working with clients because we're providing the in-the-moment support, yeah, the amount of feedback that I get that says that I provided them a space for them to feel validated and heard. So if somebody does feel confident to open up to you, it doesn't have to be awkward. Just listen to them.
Yeah, you don't have to have the answers.
No,
yeah.
Sometimes we don't always need the answers. And what's also important as well is if somebody has had that confidence to open up and start talking and really share what's going on for them, just to be mindful not to make it about yourself.
Yeah.
So we can share experiences and say, yeah, I kind of understand what you mean because such and such a thing happened to me. Don't get too much into yourself. You can identify with that, but then just try and bring it back to that person and, yeah, say, however, I recognise that it is different, and just encourage them to keep talking. So yeah, it's about being mindful of not completely taking the focus, yeah, away from them, because I think a lot of the time I notice it in my friendships, and sometimes it's quite annoying. I have to remind myself they're not counsellors.
Yeah, and you're not their counsellor, yeah, as well. Yeah. People
listen to speak, so you can see them holding something because they're dying to tell you something.
Yeah.
And what it does, it just invalidates that speaker then, because they're thinking, oh, you're just making it about yourself, you're not listening to what I'm saying, you want to talk about your stuff. It is okay to share your things as well, yeah, because the person that you're kind of listening to will think, oh, actually they get what I mean, they've experienced that. When I was training to be a counsellor, I was a peer supporter for Stockport Mind,
yeah,
and it was so different going into a counselling role from being a peer supporter, because as counsellors we're trained not to self-disclose, but we can if it's of benefit to the client and, yeah, it's not making it about us, it's still focusing on our client. Whereas as a peer supporter, I could share all of my, yeah, life experiences, but it was very brief, and I always brought it back to the person, yeah, that I was really listening to and supporting in that moment.
I think this is really, really practical advice, actually, and especially with the. It's so easy. We're almost like it's ingrained in us as human beings to be competitive and be like, yeah, well, that's happened to me, but, yeah, 10 times worse. But also at the same time, you want to relate and be relatable. Like, you're not the only person that's going through this. Don't worry, you're not the only one in the world that's experienced this. But that's not a very tactful way to do it. So that's really practical advice. And I think I made a note before to kind of circle back. You mentioned about self-harm, more seriously. And I think you guys get quite a lot of calls on the helpline. Like,
we do.
My daughter's self-harming, or I think a colleague at work is self-harming. And there's a huge piece to that about how to broach that, how to signpost and support, whilst also being mindful. Not many people know, unless you're in the clinical world, but self-harm is actually a coping mechanism.
It is.
And can be quite dangerous to get someone to stop and remove that from their process of whatever it is they're working through, isn't it? So
yeah.
Do you feel comfortable touching a little bit on how to broach self-harm with other people?
Yeah, so something was interesting that you said there, people kind of cut as a way of coping.
Yeah.
And it might sound really strange to some people that aren't like kind of in this clinical world, but we educate our clients on safe cutting.
Yeah.
So
which might sound barbaric to
it
people
would,
that haven't
because they would
insight,
be thinking, why are you letting people cut themselves?
Yeah.
But actually it's about kind of keeping it on the surface, not going too deep, keeping it clean and sterile. Mind have an amazing list of, if anybody out there wants to support someone and get further advice, there's about 5 different organisations on there to help, and some of them are NHS ones with advice and guidance on to help to support people that are self-harming. But it's important to be patient with somebody.
You can't just go, you should stop.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously they should, but it's not It's not a click your fingers.
No.
You can't, that's just going to be more unsafe for that person. It's like, I know this sounds, again, quite extreme, but like a heroin addict, for example, you would wean them off and go on like methadone and you would bring them down slowly, wouldn't you? And I think it's quite a similar process for someone that's used self-harm as a mechanism for a sustained period of time.
Yes, most definitely. And for myself, I'm going to share a little bit here about...
if you're comfortable to do so.
Yeah,
absolutely.
when I had my eating disorder, I won't go into too much detail about kind of how often I was kind of binging and purging. But when I worked with, this is way before I became a therapist and I didn't have any knowledge on counselling or theory, we worked on an approach where rather than making yourself sick straight after kind of eating or kind of binging in those times where you feel really low and it's tough, distracting for 10 minutes. So what we did there was built that up over time. So it was 10 minutes before like holding it without kind of being sick.
Yeah.
Then it was 20 minutes and half an hour, and you work with kind of counsellors or supporters to find things that you can do. And I think when someone is struggling, they often lose sight of the resources that are already there in their lives. Yeah. Help your loved ones, your colleagues, your family, look at what do they enjoy in life, or what did they enjoy, what they're not doing anymore. How can they pick those things back up? Because it is tough when people are lacking motivation, they're feeling low, if they've got symptoms of depression. It's finding ways in which you can distract people, and in that moment, taking a step back and making a more positive choice. But what's important is not to pressure somebody. Yeah. We can't put that pressure on them because we can only control ourselves and our responses to that. We can't control someone else's. Yeah. So we need to be patient with people. We need to be reassuring and supportive and non-critical, non-judgmental. Yeah. And what's really important as well is even if something might sound horrendous to you, or like the word you use, like really barbaric, trying to be mindful of your responses, because if you was like, oh my God, oh wow, you kind of making it bigger for that person there. Yeah. So it's being mindful of the way that you respond to if somebody kind of opens up and makes that disclosure to you. Internally, you might be thinking, oh my God, you might be panicking. But just try and remain calm. Yeah. And
I think that's a good one for parents.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, your love is unconditional for your children, isn't it?
Yeah.
And regardless of how old you are as a parent and how old your child is, 3, 33, 53, you know, you're still going to have, in many instances, that knee-jerk response to be horrified at what that you can't help, that, you know, this person must have immediate support. My daughter, my son must get help immediately. But it's not, you can't react in that way. And I know that what we're saying applies to everyone that is concerned about someone they know or love. Yes. But I really think for a parent, that, because I think your love and your desire to do anything to help them goes above and beyond anything in this world.
That kind of, that will be your driving point to want to kind of protect them. And what happens is, I won't go into too much detail. There's some really, really good information on there, on Google. It's something what we call the PAC model. So it's the parent, adult, child. Yeah. And in the parent, there's nurturing parent and critical parent. And in child, there's adapted child and free child. So Eric Byrne, he's a founder of Transactional Analysis, TA. Yeah. And so if anyone wants to look, just type in PAC model into Google. Keep to very simple kind of pages, though. I don't want you to feel that you have to go and read reams of information. But it's interesting. The way we respond to someone will almost determine the way that they respond to that. Yeah. It has like a domino effect. So if we can come from a nurturing place and someone feels that someone cares about them, then they're not going to feel criticised. There will be a more positive response from that person. Whereas if we're criticising, that adapted child is where someone will respond in a negative way. They will withdraw, shut down, walk away from the situation, the conversation. So it's important that we kind of look at our interactions as well in that, and trying to remain calm, even though inside we are struggling, oh my God, panicking, what are we going to do with this?
I'm their mother, I know best. I'm their father, I know best.
Yeah, so it's always coming from that nurturing place, that caring place, in kind of an adult-like way, especially if you've got teenage children, young adults. They think they're adults, don't they? Like, I remember being 14 and thinking that I was like in my mid-20s. So trying to treat your kind of young child or young teenager, young adult with respect, and approaching it in a way where they feel validated and that they're not being treated like a child.
I think we've covered so many like really practical tips here. I think I think that anyone that's listening will have picked up at least one thing to take away, which is, I mean, I've picked up a couple of things, or more like been refreshed and reminded on the right way to, you know, in the industry that we are in, and the work that we do and how we work at Health Assured, we've created a very open culture, you know, and very transparent. You know, we have our Wellbeing Wednesdays where one of us managers will go and sit in a room and just let someone purge themselves to us. So, you know, we're very kind of adept at active listening.
Yes.
But it's nice to have those reminders. I think, I mean, whilst it went quite heavy very briefly there, talking about self-harm and eating and, you know, disordered eating as well, you know, eating disorders, and I think that can be quite heavy and intense, but they're the things people want to know. You know, they don't know how to that. People will feel very, very lost in those situations when they've discovered or might suspect someone is harming themselves as a result of their mental health. So I think it's really important to bring light to those pieces, you know, to those topics. And I think for anyone that's listening as well, obviously I will do a shameless plug about Health Assured and the fact that you guys, you know, you counsellors are there 24/7 to answer those queries, and we get more and more of them. Or even, you know, like if you want a live chat with a digital counsellor, for example. But just because if you have access to an EAP doesn't mean you only have to talk about yourself. We can support other people. When I say you, I'm talking to the listener there.
The listeners.
And it might be as well that we can help you encourage a conversation with them where, you know, your loved one, or, you know, they might have access to the EAP themselves, they might have their own EAP, they might have whatever access, but you might encourage them to have a conversation with their GP. We know it's very difficult getting an appointment with the GP, but things like EAPs, helplines and things like that are all available, and we could help empower you if you are concerned to signpost. So whilst you've given loads and loads of tips, Amy, it might be that there's a bit more of a specific situation that they want help with. They go, you know what, I need to run this situation through, hash it out with someone. And you counsellors are so good at being able to like give immediate kind of suggestions. Why don't you try this? Why don't you explore this? They might even be able to go into a bit more detail about that, you know, the PAT model. So I think remember that those resources are to hand.
And one thing I'd like to add to that, Kayleigh, is it's really important to remember that the person that you're supporting, you're just as important in this. So it's being aware of your own boundaries and not giving too much that it's a detriment to your own mental health as well. So when I do work with clients on the phone that are seeking advice and guidance on how to support a family member or a child, I always like to check in with the person that I'm talking to as well. And momentarily I'll say, let's take everyone out of this, take your child out of this, let's sit with you. What's going on for you right now? How is this impacting you? Because we can't pour from an empty glass. And it's reminding ourselves that we need to check in with us. And even though it is important that we want to make sure our loved ones are safe or our friends and family, we're important as well. And we can't stretch ourselves beyond our means just to ensure somebody else is supported, because we can lose ourselves in that.
That's really important, that feelings of selfishness. It's not selfish, but you always need to put yourself first. Otherwise you are completely useless to other people. You won't have the capacity to help. You won't have the reserves there to give back to people and give them what they need.
So it's important as well to have your own personal boundaries. When you are supporting a loved one, make sure you have your own personal boundaries there as well, in terms of it's not causing you too much negativity in your own life. Although I do appreciate it is difficult if it's someone that you love and that you're really close to. And obviously you are going to worry. But yeah, just bringing it back to yourself as well and checking in with yourself.
And if you don't know how to do that, you can access structured counselling to get help with that, to figure out what works. Because it might not be something that you can figure out in an immediate call. You can try some different bits and pieces, but it might be that this person, so maybe I'm living with someone with a more serious mental health condition like bipolar, for example, or really complex trauma, to the point where it infiltrates my daily life, and I need to, maybe I haven't got the right boundaries in place, but you can access, short-term counselling is beneficial for that, because you can navigate, and is it the miracle question? Is that what we use in solution focus, isn't it? The miracle question is, how can I stop this from impacting my life, on a daily basis and become overbearing for me? And that's something you can work with in a very short-term way, to reinforce some of those boundaries and figure out new ways to put them in place. Well, it's not letting that other person down or feel like you're letting them down. They're still supported, but you are not running yourself into the ground as well. So it's not a bad thing to get counselling to support someone else, to keep that boundary in place. You don't have to get counselling for your own mental health condition. You can get counselling just to work on your own resilience or confidence and things, not a mental health condition in itself.
Yeah, and to the listeners out there, just to be mindful, it's not guaranteed on every account, because every account that we hold is quite unique in terms of what you can access on there. But it's always worth checking out whether dependents can access the in the moment support, because a few of our accounts do allow dependents, young people,
the majority actually, isn't it?
And spouses to access the in the moment support. So there's always that option as well. If there's support for yourself, just to check out whether there's any availability on the account for one of your family members to speak to one of our counsellors for some in the moment support, for
it's
some
so
hints
beneficial,
and tips, and
especially when
that.
We're in the cost of living crisis, and I imagine by the time this podcast goes out, we'll still be in the midst of that cost of living crisis, and in fact it might be worse. Private counselling can be very expensive for some people, and then you're adding in a $3,000 electricity bill a year and stuff. So there's so many people that have access to EAP that probably don't realise they do, through their partner, through their spouse, or through their parent. So definitely, if you're unsure, call EAP and we'll double check. We'll double check what you've got access to, and it's highly likely it'll be one of your close family members can access as well and get the same level of support, which is really good to know. Well, have you got anything else, Amy, that you think would be really useful? I think we've covered so much ground and really practical tips. And I want to say thank you very much. That was absolutely fabulous. Was there anything else that you think might be beneficial?
No, just to kind of summarise and reinforce about the active listening, just being there for somebody, being present, and just being really patient and understanding, and trying not to kind of criticise, and like you spoke about, Kayleigh, at the beginning, just to kind of wrap this up, don't worry too much if you've not approached it in a way that you wanted to, because there's no right or wrong way. As long as that person that's receiving it doesn't feel offended, we're all human at the end of the day. And sometimes I approach things with clients where I thought, I could have said that a bit differently. So not to be too hard on yourself, and just make yourself available to support your loved ones.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Amy.
Real, thank you.